The cold night was colder than usual. The wind cut through the streets like sharp knives, carrying with it the smell of wet concrete and smoke from the factories far away. Rain fell in thin sheets, dripping from rooftops and collecting in small dirty puddles on the broken sidewalks. Most people had already gone inside their warm homes, closing their doors tightly against the storm. The streets looked empty, except for a single woman walking slowly under a weak umbrella. Her name was Maria. She wore an old coat that had been patched many times, and her shoes were thin, soaked through with water. Her shift at the diner had just ended, and her body was heavy with tiredness. She carried a small cloth bag in her hands. Inside were scraps of bread and half a cup of soup she had been allowed to take home. It was not much, but it was something to add. As Maria turned the corner, she noticed a faint sound like soft crying mixed with the whistle of the wind. She stopped and listened carefully. At first, she thought it was only the storm playing tricks on her ears, but then she saw them under the broken doorway of an abandoned building. For small figures sat huddled together. Their clothes were torn and wet, their hair tangled, their faces pale with hunger. They looked like shadows of children curled into each other, trying to share the little warmth they had left. Maria's heart tightened. She walked closer, her umbrella shaking in her hands. The oldest boy, maybe 12 years old, looked up at her. His eyes were full of fear, as if he expected her to shout at them or chase them away. The younger ones clung to him, too weak even to cry loudly. "Are you hungry?" Maria asked softly. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from the ache in her chest. The boy said nothing. He only nodded slowly, his lips trembling. His eyes darted to the bag in her hand. The little girl beside him let out a tiny whimper, her belly rumbling so loudly it broke Maria's heart into pieces. Without thinking twice, Maria knelt down. She opened her bag and handed them the bread. The children grabbed it quickly, stuffing pieces into their mouths, chewing fast as if the food might vanish. Maria smiled through the tears that had filled her eyes. She gave them the soup too, holding the cup so they could take turns sipping. The warmth of the soup brought color back to their cheeks, if only for a moment. The rain kept falling, soaking through Maria's umbrella until droplets ran down her neck. She should have gone home. Her own bed was waiting, her little apartment, her warm blanket, but she could not leave them. Something inside her whispered, "Stay, they need you." So she sat with them. She spread her coat wide and tried to cover the shivering children. The smallest boy, no older than 5, leaned against her shoulder and closed his eyes. His breathing was shaky at first, but then it slowed, like he finally felt safe enough to rest. Maria looked at their faces one by one. She saw pain carved into them, the kind of pain no child should ever know: hunger, fear, abandonment. She remembered her own childhood nights when she had cried into her pillow because her parents were gone, and that's when her stomach had burned with emptiness. She had sworn to herself back then that if she ever had the chance, she would not let another child suffer the way she had. The storm grew harsher, the thunder rolling across the sky. But Maria did not move. She whispered to the children, "It's okay. You're safe now." She rocked the smallest one in her arms as if he were her own son. The oldest boy looked at her carefully, his lips parting to speak for the first time. "Why are you helping us?" he asked. His voice was thin, unsure, as though kindness was a language he had forgotten. Maria touched his cheek gently. "Because I know what it feels like to be alone." For a moment, silence filled the air, broken only by the rain and the occasional rumble of thunder. Then, slowly, the boy lowered his head, as if he finally allowed himself to believe her words. Time passed. Hours slipped away as the night dragged on. Maria's body grew stiff, her legs numb from sitting on the cold ground. But she stayed. She wrapped her arms around them, whispering lullabies she barely remembered from her own childhood. The children clung to her as though they had known her forever. Where the first light of dawn touched the rooftops, the rain began to fade. The storm was over, but the city still looked gray and tired. Maria rose carefully, her back aching. She looked down at the children, now sleeping against her. Their faces were peaceful for the first time. She took a deep breath. She knew what she had to do. She could not just feed them once and walk away. She could not pretend she hadn't seen them. These children needed more than a stranger's kindness. For one night, they needed a home. Maria whispered to herself, "From today, you are mine. I will not let you go." And with that silent promise, she lifted the smallest boy into her arms, held the little girl's hand, and guided the other to stand. The road ahead would not be easy. She had little money, little space, and little strength. But she had love, and sometimes love was stronger than everything else. The cold night was over. A new journey had begun. A mother's choice of morning sun rose slowly, washing the streets with pale golden light. The storm had passed, but the ground was still wet, and the air smelled of damp stone and smoke from the chimneys. Maria walked, carefully, holding the youngest boy in her arms. The other 3 children followed close behind her, clutching at her coat, their small feet splashing in puddles. Her apartment was not far away. It was small, tucked at the top of an old building. With peeling paint and narrow stairs, she unlocked the wooden door, which creaked loudly, and let the children step inside. For the first time in many nights, they were no longer under the open sky. The room was humble to worn chairs, a tiny table, and a bed pushed against the wall. The floor was clean, though the paint on the walls had faded. Maria's home was poor, but it was warm. The children looked around with wide eyes. To them, even this little space felt like a palace. Maria set down the youngest boy, who immediately curled up on her blanket, too tired to stay awake. The little girl touched the table gently, as if she couldn't believe it was real. The 2 older boys stood silently, watching Maria as though waiting for her to tell them if they were allowed to stay. Maria went into the small kitchen corner and began heating water. Her hands shook from exhaustion, but she moved with purpose. She filled a pot with beans, chopped a few onions, and added rice. It was all she had left in her cupboard. As the smell of food spread through the air, the children's eyes followed her every move. Their stomachs growled, and they sat quietly on the floor, waiting. When the food was ready, Maria served it on 4 chipped plates. She gave the largest portions to the children, keeping only a few spoonfuls for herself. "Eat slowly," she said with a smile. "There will always be food tomorrow." The children ate greedily, stuffing their mouths, their eyes bright with joy. Maria watched them, her chest heavy with emotion. She remembered her own hunger years ago, the night she had prayed for even a piece of bread. Watching these children eat filled her with both pain and relief. Pain, because she saw herself in them. Relief, because at least tonight they would not sleep hungry when they finished eating. The oldest boy finally spoke. His voice was quiet, but steady. "Why are you helping us? You don't even know us." Maria looked at him carefully. His face was thin, but his eyes carried a sharpness beyond his age. As though life had forced him to grow too quickly, she placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Because I know what it feels like to have no one, and because you need someone to believe in you." The boy lowered his gaze, and for the first time, Maria saw his eyes shine with tears. That night, Maria tucked the children into her bed. She gave them her only blanket, and she herself slept on the hard chair by the window. As the children drifted into peaceful sleep, she stayed awake, staring out at the stars. Her heart was torn. She had very little money. Her job at the diner barely paid enough for her rent and food. Now, with 4 extra mouths to feed, her life would become much harder. She knew neighbors would gossip. Some might even tell her she was foolish. But deep inside, Maria also knew she had already made her choice. "These children are mine now," she thought. "I will raise them, no matter what it costs me." The next morning, she woke early. The children were still asleep, their faces calm and innocent. In the morning light, she left quietly for work, locking the door behind her at the diner. Maria worked harder than ever. She carried trays, cleaned tables, washed dishes until her hands turned red. When her shift ended, she went to another house cleaning job. Every coin she earned went into buying food and clothes for the children. When she came home that evening, tired and sore, she found the children waiting for her. They had tried to clean the apartment as best as they could. The little girl had arranged flowers from the street in a glass bottle, placing it on the table like a gift. The youngest boy ran to her and hugged her legs tightly. Maria's eyes filled with tears. For years, she had lived alone in silence. Now, her home was filled with laughter, tiny footsteps, and voices calling her name. As days turned into weeks, the bond between Maria and the children grew. They began calling her Mama without even realizing it. The sound of that word struck her heart each time like a bell, soft, sweet, and powerful. The neighbors gossiped, of course. Some shook their heads. "She can't afford to care for children. She is only a poor woman. She will ruin herself." Others whispered cruel things, saying she had no right to take them in. Maria ignored it all. At night, when the children were asleep, she often sat by the window and thought about the future. The road ahead would be hard, perhaps impossible. But her decision was clear. She whispered to herself, I choose them. I will fight for them. Even if the world turns against me, I will not let them go. It was not only kindness. It was not only pity. It was love, the kind of love that sacrifices everything without asking for anything in return. Maria had made her choice, and that choice would shape the lives of her children forever. Struggles and sacrifices. Days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Maria's little apartment, once so quiet and lonely, now echoed with laughter, footsteps, and the occasional arguments that only children could have. The four little ones were no longer shadows on the street. Their cheeks grew fuller, their eyes brighter, their steps stronger. But behind that joy lay Maria's heavy struggles. Every day, she rose before the sun. She slipped quietly from bed, so as not to wake the children, dressed in her faded uniform, and walked through the gray streets to the diner. There, she worked without pause, serving plates, washing dishes, cleaning tables until her back ached and her fingers turned raw. When her shift ended, she didn't rest. She hurried to her second job, scrubbing floors in rich homes, polishing furniture until her arms felt like they would break. By the time she returned home each night, her body screamed for rest. Yet the moment she opened her door and heard the children call out, Mama, every pain softened. Their smiles gave her strength she didn't know she had. Still, the sacrifices cut deep. Many nights, Maria pretended she was not hungry so the children could eat more. She would smile at them, saying she was full, then quietly drink only water. Once they had fallen asleep, her clothes grew thinner. But she saved every coin to buy shoes for the children. The oldest boy, Daniel, began to notice. He would sometimes push his plate toward her, whispering, Mama, you should eat too. Maria would ruffle his hair and laugh gently. Don't worry about me. A mother's stomach is always full when her children are fed. Life was not kind to them outside the walls of their home. The neighbors still talked. Some looked down on the children, calling them street rats when they passed by. At school, other kids teased them for their worn clothes. One day, the little girl, Anna, came home in tears, her dress dirty from being pushed into the mud. Maria knelt beside her, wiping her tears with gentle hands. Listen to me, she whispered. Clothes don't make you less. Hunger doesn't make you less. You are strong, and you are loved, and one day, the world will see who you truly are. Anna hugged her tightly, and for the first time, she believed her own worth. But Maria's struggles didn't end with gossip and hardship. Bills piled up. Rent was late more than once. Some nights, she feared they would be thrown out. She worked harder, slept less, and prayed quietly each morning before stepping into the storm of another day. Her body began to weaken. She coughed, often, her breath short from exhaustion. But she hid it from the children. They could never see her pain. To them, she was the strongest person alive. Yet the sacrifices were not without reward. Slowly, the children began to change. Daniel, the oldest, grew responsible. He would help with chores, take care of his younger siblings, and even study late into the night so that one day he could become a man Mama will be proud of. Anna began to draw, filling scraps of paper with flowers, houses, and smiling faces. She told Maria, one day I will paint our home so beautiful everyone will know what love looks like. The younger boys, Michael and David, grew playful and curious, asking questions about everything. They filled the house with laughter that drowned out the sadness of the outside world. Maria often sat quietly at night, watching them sleep. Her face was tired, her hands rough, her heart worn from endless worry. But when she saw the children safe in bed, she felt peace. They were her reward. They were the reason she kept breathing. There were moments, however, when doubt crept into her mind. One night, after paying the rent with the last of her money, Maria sat by the window, staring at the dark street outside. She whispered to herself, Am I strong enough? Can I really give them everything they need? Tears slipped down her face. She felt small, powerless against the world's cruelty. But then, she heard Daniel's voice from the bed. He wasn't asleep after all. Mama, he whispered into the darkness, you already gave us everything. You gave us a home. Maria covered her mouth, sobbing silently, her heart breaking and healing at the same time. Years would pass before the world would know her sacrifices. For now, her struggles were invisible to everyone but herself. Yet deep inside, she carried a quiet faith that her love would shape these children into something greater. that every tear she shed would become the seed of their strength. The struggles were endless, the sacrifices seemed without end, but Maria kept walking forward, carrying the weight of her little souls on her shoulders. For her, there was no other choice that she had chosen them, and she would never let go. Dreams of tomorrow's years began to pass like pages turning in a book. What once felt like survival slowly became a rhythm, a fragile routine stitched together. With Maria's endless love, the children, who had once trembled in the cold doorway of an abandoned building, now carried hope in their hearts. Maria worked harder than ever, yet she smiled more too. She had planted seeds of love, and slowly they began to bloom. The oldest boy's promenade. The oldest no longer looked like the frightened 12-year-old who had once guarded his siblings on the street. His shoulders were broader now, his voice deeper. At school, he excelled in his studies, surprising even his teachers. Whenever classmates mocked him for being poor, he clenched his fists but remembered Maria's words. Don't let their words decide your worth. Late at night, Daniel would study by the dim light of a broken lamp while Maria dozed off in the chair. His eyes would often wander to her tired face, to the lines etched by years of sacrifice. In those moments, he made a promise to himself. One day, I will change her life. One day, she will never have to suffer again. Anna's color Santa, gentle and creative, had a gift in her hands. She loved to draw and paint, using any scraps of paper she could find. With bits of chalk stolen from the streets or cheap crayons Maria bought, she filled their walls with drawings of bright gardens, golden skies, and families smiling together. One day, she painted Maria as a queen crowned not with gold, but with a halo of light. That's how I see you, Mama, Anna whispered shyly when Maria found it. Tears filled Maria's eyes as she pulled her close. Anna dreamed of becoming an artist, of filling the world with colors that could tell stories of hope. She wanted to show everyone what love looked like when it was given without measure. The little ones growing, Mitchell and David, the youngest two, grew playful and curious. They filled the apartment with noise and laughter, often running barefoot across the floor until Maria scolded them gently. But beneath their childish joy was a growing awareness of Maria's sacrifices. Michael once caught her skipping a meal and asked, "Mama, why don't you eat?" Maria kissed his forehead and replied, "A mother's heart is fed by her children's joy." The boys didn't fully understand, but they felt her love in every word. Maria's hidden pain through the children were growing. Maria's body was weakening. The years of endless work, sleepless nights, and skipped meals began to take their toll. She often coughed in the mornings, and her hands ached from scrubbing floors. But she never let the children see her pain. To them, she was unshakable. To herself, she was afraid that her strength might not last long enough to see them safe. At night, when the children were asleep, she prayed quietly at the window. "God, give me enough time, just enough to see them grown. Let me carry them to a future where they will not suffer like I did." Dreams in the small apartment despite the hardships. Their home was full of dreams. Daniel spoke of becoming a lawyer, someone who could fight for justice. Anna dreamed of galleries and paintings that touched hearts. Michael talked of building houses for the poor so no child would ever sleep in the rain again. David wanted to be a teacher so children could learn without fear. Maria listened to each dream with shining eyes, then chased them, she told her children. Chase them with everything you have, because dreams are what make tomorrow brighter. The children didn't just see Maria as their mother. They saw her as their compass, their light. Every goal they set was for her as much as it was for themselves. The harsh reality of life outside their home was never gentle. The neighbors still gossiped. Some still looked down on them. Money was always scarce, and Maria often worked herself sick just to keep food on the table. There were nights when the electricity went out because she couldn't pay the bill on time. The children studied by candlelight, their shadows dancing on the wall. Yet even in those dark moments, Maria whispered, "We are rich, rich in love, rich in hope, and no one can take that away from us." The children believed her, and so, instead of breaking under the weight of poverty, they grew stronger. Their bond became unshakable, their dreams brighter. The silent of one evening, as the children sat around the table, Daniel spoke softly, almost like a leader making a vow. "One day," he said, looking at his siblings, "we will change Mama's life. She gave us everything when she had nothing. We will give her everything when we have something." Anna nodded, her small hand tightening around Maria's. Michael and David echoed the words. Their young faces serious. Maria tried to laugh it off, but her heart trembled. Deep inside, she wondered if her children truly understood the world's cruelty, if their dreams would survive the storm. Yet when she looked into their determined faces, she felt something powerful. Faith that her sacrifices would not be forgotten. Faith that her love was building something that would last longer than her own life. That night, as she lay awake listening to their soft breathing, Maria whispered into the dark, "If tomorrow belongs to you, then all my pain was worth it." And so, the dreams of tomorrow burned brightly inside a small apartment, carried by for children who once had nothing but now had a mother who gave them the world. The weight of time years passed like waves rolling in and fading away. The 4 children Maria had once found trembling in the cold had grown taller, their faces stronger, their dreams sharper. Their childhood had been filled with both love and hunger, laughter and tears. But now, as young adults, they were ready to step into the world. A mother's silent pride of Maria watched them with quiet pride. Daniel had finished high school with honors, earning a scholarship to study law. Anna's art had started gaining attention. Teachers praised her talent, and even small galleries began to notice her paintings. Michael and David, though still in school, showed promise, one with numbers and engineering, the other with books and teaching. Maria often sat by the window, watching them leave for school or part-time jobs, their heads held high to the world. They were ordinary young people, but to her, they were miracles, proof that love could rebuild what life had broken. The fading body. Yet as her children grew stronger, Maria's body grew weaker. The years of endless work, of bending her back and burning her strength, began to show. Her cough deepened, her hands trembled, and sometimes her legs failed her when she climbed the stairs. She tried to hide it. When her children asked if she was fine, she smiled and said, "Just tired, that's all." But at night, when the apartment was quiet, she would clutch her chest and whisper prayers to the darkness. One evening, Daniel came home early and found her leaning against the sink, her face pale. He rushed to her side. "Mama, you're sick," he said firmly, fear in his voice. Maria shook her head and forced a smile. "No, my son, I'm just old. Don't worry about me. Worry about your future." But Daniel knew, and so did the others. They saw the lines on her face deepen, the weight in her step grow heavier, and silently, each child carried her sacrifice like a fire in their chest. The world's cruel life outside the family still tested them. Money was always thin, bills stacked on the table like enemies waiting for battle. Maria worked fewer hours, now because her health wouldn't allow more, and the children tried to help with part-time jobs. Some neighbors still whispered, some still reminded them of where they came from. Children once found in the street. But the siblings no longer bowed their heads. They remembered every word Maria had spoken to them in their childhood. "You are strong. You are worthy. You are more than your hunger." Those words had become their armor. The heavy choice then came the hardest moment. When Daniel was offered a chance to study in another city, it was his dream law school, the path to becoming the man he promised Maria he would be. But it meant leaving home. Daniel sat with Maria one night, his scholarship letter in his hands, his heart torn in two. "Mama," he whispered, "I don't want to leave you. You need me." Maria looked at him with eyes full of both love and pain. She took his hands in hers, her voice trembling but steady. "My son, if you stay, my sacrifices mean nothing. If you go, my sacrifices will bloom into something beautiful. Don't chain yourself to me. Fly high, so one day you can return and lift me too." Tears filled Daniel's eyes. He hugged her tightly, burying his face against her shoulder. That night, he made her another silent promise. "I will come back for you. I will give you the life you deserve." The siblings Anna, Michael, and David gathered in their small room later that night. They talked in whispers, but their voices carried the fire of determination. "Daniel will go first," Anna said, her hands clutching her sketchbook, "but we will all follow. Mama's life will not end in this apartment. One day, she will know what it means to rest." Michael clenched his fists. "She gave us everything. We owe her everything." And David, the quietest of them all, spoke with a strength none had expected. "We will return for her, no matter how long it takes." It was more than a promise. It was a vow carved into their souls. The long nights, the years that followed were the hardest. With Daniel away at school, Maria missed him deeply, but wrote him letters full of encouragement. She told him to study hard, to chase his dream, even when her hands shook too much to hold the pen. Anna worked small jobs while painting, her eyes shining with ambition. Michael and David studied hard, determined to follow paths that would make Maria proud, but Maria's health continued to slip. Some nights, she struggled to breathe. Other nights, she couldn't rise from bed until one of the children helped her. Yet she never complained. She kept her pain behind a smile because her children's dreams mattered more than her suffering. The mother's reflection on late evening, Maria sat alone at the window, the moonlight spilling across her face. She whispered softly into the night, "I don't know how much time I have left, but if I could see them strong, if I could see them safe, then my life was worth it. They saved me as much as I saved them." Her voice trembled, but there was peace. In her heart, the weight of time was heavy upon Maria, but in that weight lay the seeds of something greater, a story still unfolding, a future not yet written. The children she had once found in the cold had grown into men and women of strength, carrying her love like a torch dot, and though Maria's body weakened, her legacy only grew stronger with each passing day. The return after 20 years' time is a strange river. It flows quietly, carrying people from one shore of life to another before they even realize how far they've traveled. 20 years had passed since that cold night when Maria first found the 4 children huddled in the rain. The children were no longer children. They had grown into adults with lives, careers, and names respected in the world. Yet in their hearts, nothing had changed. They were still the hungry souls Maria had fed, the broken hearts she had healed, the lost voices she had given a home. To Dot and now, after 2 decades, it was time to keep their vow. Maria's lonely Rumeria was older now, her hair silver, her body frail. Illness and years of hard labor had left her bent, her hands shaking. She lived quietly in a small care home on the edge of the city. The apartment she had raised the children in was long gone, but she was not bitter. Every day, she sat near the window, watching the sky. She thought of her children constantly. Though it had been years since she had last seen them together, life had pulled them far away. But she prayed for them every night. Some neighbors had forgotten her, others whispered cruelly, saying she gave her life for children that weren't even hers. But Maria only smiled. "They don't understand," she thought. "Those children were my destiny, my greatest blessing." Still, in the quiet hours, she often felt the loneliness sink deep into her bones. Her eyes would fill with tears as she whispered, "Did I give enough? Did I truly save them?" The day of return in a bright spring morning, Maria sat in her chair, the sunlight touching her wrinkled face. She coughed softly, her hands trembling as she reached for her shawl. Suddenly, the door of the care home opened. The sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway, and then she heard it, a voice she hadn't heard in years, deep and steady now, but filled with the same warmth. "Mama." Her heart stopped. She turned, her breath catching in her throat. There, standing in the doorway, were the 4 children she had raised, no longer thin and broken, but strong, proud, and shining. Daniel stood tall in a suit, his eyes sharp with confidence. He had become the lawyer he always dreamed of, fighting for justice and protecting the helpless. Beside him, Anna carried a portfolio of her paintings, her name already spoken in galleries and exhibitions. Michael wore the badge of an engineer, having built homes and shelters for the poor. David, gentle and wise, had become a teacher, shaping young minds with patience. They rushed to her, falling to their knees before her chair. Tears streamed down their faces as they clutched her hands. "You saved us," Daniel said, his voice breaking. "Now it's our turn to save you." The gift of freedom. Maria's hands shook as she touched their faces one by one. She could hardly believe it, her little ones, now grown, now powerful. Her eyes filled with tears that blurred her vision. "My children," she whispered, "you came back." Anna kissed her forehead, her tears falling. "We never left, Mama. You were always with us in every step, in every choice, in every dream." Michael laid papers on the table, documents, signed and sealed. "This is your house now, Mama. A real home. You will never work again, never worry again. We bought it for you. It is yours forever." David held up another surprise arrangements. "For her care, the best doctors, the best treatment. We will not let you suffer anymore. You gave us life. Now we give you freedom." Maria sobbed, her body shaking with both joy and disbelief. For so long she had given without expecting anything in return. She had carried her children through hunger and storms, never once thinking of herself. And now, 20 years later, had come back to lift her up, to set her free, the mother's tears as they surrounded her. Maria remembered that first night, the cold rain, the broken doorway, the frightened children huddled together. She remembered the sacrifices, the hunger, the endless work. She remembered the night she had sat by the window, wondering if she would ever see their dreams come true. Now, looking at them strong, successful, filled with love, she knew her answer. Every struggle had been worth it. Every tear, every pain, every sacrifice had bloomed into this moment. "You don't understand," Maria whispered, her voice shaking. "I didn't save you. You saved me. You gave my life meaning. You gave me a family when I had none." Daniel held her hand tightly. "Then let us keep saving each other, Mama, forever." The new beginning that evening, they took Maria to her new home. It was a beautiful house with wide windows and a garden filled with flowers Anna had chosen. Michael had designed the rooms so they were warm and easy for her to move around in. David had filled the shelves with books, while Daniel made sure every legal paper carried her name. As Maria walked through the door, the scent of fresh paint and blooming roses filled the air. She stopped, her heart overwhelmed. For the first time in her life, she had a home that was hers, not borrowed, not fragile, but safe and lasting. She looked at her children, her tears falling freely. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. Daniel smiled softly. "You deserve the world, Mama, and this is only the beginning." Full circle that night, Maria sat in her new chair by the window, the moonlight pouring in. The four of them sat around her, laughing, talking, sharing memories of their childhood. The loneliness of her old days was gone, replaced by a warmth so deep it seemed to fill every corner of the room. The circle was complete. The woman who had once rescued for lost children was now rescued by them. The love she had planted had returned to her, stronger than she could have ever dreamed. And as she closed her eyes, listening to their voices, Maria whispered to herself with a smile, "At last, I am free."